Good afternoon, church. Pastor Craig here once again. Midweek greeting. Happy Wednesday to you. Here it is, middle of September, end of September. Just about finished this month. Hard to believe where time is going. And I hope you're able to enjoy some of this fall weather that has felt more like summer weather. Lately I've been reading through the minor prophets. I always figured that the hardest part of the Bible to read through was the lists of names and the list of laws at the beginning of the Old Testament. And lots of people will come to me as a pastor and say, I started to read through the Bible in a year and I got not very far into the Old Testament and I just can't keep going. This is just too hard to follow all this stuff. And I hear you. That's tough sections to read. But I'm finding this time reading the minor prophets and the major prophets as well, just to be really tough. I'm finding it hard to follow what's the story that the minor prophets are a part of. And then I'm reading through these words of prophecy and I'm going, is this prophetic words just for the people of Israel? Or was this prophetic words that also apply to us? Are there some things that still haven't happened yet? And then I find myself considering history and going, well, did some of these things actually happen? And after a while, my head just starts spinning. I'm probably overthinking it, really, but that's just where I'm at this time in reading through. I want to truly understand what was God saying to the people of Israel, and how did some of these things come to pass? And unfortunately, much of the prophecies that are recorded are words of caution. If you don't return to God, this is what is going to happen. And it's descriptions of awful times where people of Israel turned away from God and chose instead to follow foreign idols and the gods of their neighbors. And it's not good stuff that they were doing. And yet there's one thing that has jumped out at me. Well, I find it interesting to look at the history and find out about, sure enough, they end up being taken over by foreign nations and they end up being enslaved and mistreated and all these kind of things. But here's what has struck me is that time and time again throughout the books of the prophets, there is not only the caution, there is also the promise of blessing. If you will return to God, He will bless. And as we look at the history of the people of Israel and consider the time period in which the prophets were writing, we're actually able to see that fulfilled time and time again. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but really the entire history of humanity is a cycle that we go through over and over and over. We often give the people of Israel kind of a bad rap of being, oh, couldn't you get it right? I mean, even just the time when they were in the desert, those 40 years of wandering, how many times did they give up on God and say, forget it, we're done with Him, and then they turn back to God and experience blessing? Like, I don't think we can get enough food. What did you bring us out here for, God? This is crazy. You want us just to die here? And God provides food. And how much later they're going, there's no water. God, what are you doing? Did you bring us out here to die? At least in Egypt, we could drink what we needed to have to drink. And yet, they experience God's touch again. And they experience His provision. And time after time, they kept turning their backs on God. And as we track along with the people of Israel, we see that the consequences to turning their back on God became more and more intense. As foreign nations started to take over, as they became enslaved once again, as they were tortured, they were ridiculed, all kinds of awful stuff that happened. And yet, when they turned back to God, God not only restored them, He blessed them. And I've been reading in Micah, and I came across these words that describe a time when the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established. At the highest of the mountains, it will be exalted above the hills, and people will stream to it. Many nations will come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us His ways, so that we may walk in His paths. The law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between many peoples. He will settle disputes for strong nations far and wide. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train their war anymore. Everyone will sit under their own vine and under their own fig tree, and no one will make them afraid, for the Lord Almighty has spoken. All the nations may walk in the name of their gods, but we will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever. Now, as I say, sometimes it's hard to track with prophecy. Was this a word that was just for that time period? And was this something the people of Israel did experience? They did experience a time of peace after that. We do know that because they did return to the Lord. And maybe it is just a prophecy that's written for them, and we can look back on it in history and see how when they returned to the Lord, they became a nation that people actually came to looking for advice. They lived in a time of peace. But I also think that this is a prophecy that describes what is yet to come. Of that time period when we will truly be united under Christ. Not just a specific church, not just a specific group of people, not just a specific nation, but all nations. What an incredible hope that gives us. For the people of Israel, it gave them hope that there could be peace in their lifetime, and there was. And for us, we can have hope in whatever circumstances we find ourselves in, that God is able to work. And that if we keep focusing on Him and following Him and honoring Him, we will experience blessing of some sort. We may not know exactly what that blessing looks like, but He will bless. Sometimes the blessing is simply having Him walk with us. But when I read through the prophets, I can't help but wonder, how could God keep offering His promise of grace, of mercy, of forgiveness and blessing over and over and over again? We look at the world around us and society, and it's easy to think, man, things are falling apart, and this is it. God's going to give up on us. God has not given up on our world. God has not given up on our society. God has not given up on our community, and God has not given up on you or me. May that bring encouragement to us. Yes, it's humbling to recognize that as an individual, I need to keep going back to God. I need to keep asking forgiveness. I need to keep humbling myself before Him and choosing to focus on what He wants rather than what I want. But what an incredible promise of hope that is, that He will forgive and He will bless. God is not giving up on the world. God is not giving up on our community. God is not giving up on our church, and God is not giving up on you or on me. And that's what has struck me as I've read through the minor prophets, is that incredible message of promise and of hope. And with it the challenge to daily to choose to walk with Him, to allow His Spirit to guide and direct every action that I take, and to be willing to honor Him in everything that I do, knowing that when I screw up, He still loves me, and that I can hold on to that message of hope and of promise, and that if I am willing to return to Him and to ask His forgiveness, He will not only forgive, but He's waiting, desiring to bless. Just some thoughts I wanted to share with you this week from what God's been teaching me as I've been reading through His Word and what I'm considering a relatively tough section of Scripture. A message of blessing, a message of promise, and a message of hope. Perhaps a message that you needed to hear today too. Well, as we go into this week, once again, I would encourage us, let's be the church God has called us to be, intentionally becoming people who embrace and reveal God's love. And I look forward to worshiping with you again on Sunday, whether that be in person or on the live stream. I hope you have a great week. We'll see you when I see you.